Hi there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you are. We would love to hear where you are. So, by all means, post in the chat where you're viewing from. My name is Catherine Mathis. I'm the founder and CEO of Civility Partners. We are a consulting firm focused on building positive workplace cultures. And every week I do this LinkedIn live show. Today I have Ieva, and I'm going to let you introduce yourself, Ieva, because I feel like I'm going to butcher.
Sure thing. Hi, everybody. Really nice to be here. Thanks for Catherine for inviting me. Yes, I'm Ieva. I'm founder and CEO of Mindletic, our mental gym with the vision that everybody should train their emotional muscles no matter how mentally fit they are, individually, with a community or certified psychologists. And this is where we work with mindful employers who aim to prevent costly emotional disbalance of their employees.
Yeah, thank you for that. Now, tell us a little bit about what you do when you're working with organizations. I'd love to start there.
Yeah, so Mindletic is built as this mental gym with a gym concept where we introduce mindful employers worldwide, mainly tech companies, tech innovative companies who aim to prevent employee burnout, turnover, and increase productivity. So basically, they reach out to us in order to partner up for providing services, anonymized services to their employees remotely. And this is where employees, thanks to their mindful employers, can spare some of their time by having a personalized training programs based on their reflected emotional state and whether they want to change it or not. And based on their reflections, system personalizes experience, guiding them towards meditations, self-care exercises, community activities, team level activities for psychological safety, or one-on-ones with psychologists.
Awesome. That's amazing. And I'm curious to hear your perspective because you work from all around the world. I feel like here in the States, at least, emotions are not really allowed at work, right? Maybe a little more recently with COVID, we've been more able to be emotional, but lots of comments around crying makes you look weak, and if you're too emotional, then people get nervous. You're this kind of this squeaky wheel, or you're being dramatic. So I feel like I spend a lot of time talking about the fact that we need to let emotions be, they need to be okay at work. We've got to switch that stigma. So I'm just curious what you see around the world in that regard.
Yes, so one of our features that we have is where employees can anonymously track their emotional state based on 100 emotions divided based on two stimulus, how much energy and pleasantness the emotion requires. And based on data, we see those emotions, they're always there, whether they're expressed or not. And if they're not expressed, then it's a lot harder for employers to forecast the turnover, forecast the productivity there. And once they start seeing that, at least from anonymous data, they naturally understand the value behind it, because basically before the turnover or decreased productivity, we already see some tendencies there that we analyze with our team and a team of psychologists. And after a few incidents as such, this is where employers start inviting the expression of emotions, because it really pays off at the end, instead of hiding them and just not foreseeing what's coming there. So definitely we see a trend there, starting from anonymous data in emotional state, or even health data, that some employees are providing anonymously to employer to foresee that what's coming, but also moving towards more openness there, at least within the small teams, increasing the psychological safety to be open with emotions there, so that it really pays off not only to the individual themselves, who no longer need to use energy to hide something that is still there. I am human there, but also to the employer, due to this forecast of what conflict is about to burst, for example. So that I, as an employer, I wouldn't be surprised when I see some best performing people leaving out of nowhere. It
Right.
was already there. It's your job to foresee it. So if you're not creating a safe space for it, or at least gather that anonymously, you will be surprised unpleasantly, and it will cost you not only like time, but also you will see that in revenues or decreased decision making within the team, which will
Right.
stop you from moving forward.
So do you feel like is that your selling point when talking to CEOs? Because kind of back to that emotional thing, a lot of times I find when I'm kind of selling, building a better, respectful work environment, that sometimes you get caught up having to try to prove an ROI with that. And it sounds like you really can. You can really say, look, we can measure emotions and then predict people leaving or not. Is that accurate?
I definitely feel the pain here, and I think everybody who works in social science or social topics, and I'm coming from a psychology background, is always harder to prove than, for example, sell pen, that you have a pen, it writes, and you see the value behind it, right? Or sales optimization, where you can sell that your sales will increase. But now we see more and more articles supporting the tendency that by bringing emotions into work and working on psychological safety, working on emotional intelligence, will actually show you ROI. So starting from citing World Health Organization that proves that each investment in mental health, in emotional health, pays off 4 times. Seeing tendencies like Harvard writing about every second of millennial leaving jobs due to burnout and stress, which costs for employers for each replacement there, recruitment, onboarding, etc. Starting from such arguments and then leading into our own data that we already see when working with companies with this anonymous data, we can see increase in more pleasant emotions and stronger decision making when people feel more psychologically safe. Or one of my favorite ones is a Google study where they analyzed what are the tendencies of best performing teams. Right. And basically one of the main the main key ingredient was psychological safety, where they noticed that people were basically offering more diverse solutions there. They were more brave to take action, and therefore they brought more revenue for the company.
Yeah, I feel like Google kind of made that phrase a hot topic, even though those of us in the social sciences were thinking and talking about it long before then. I'm curious, so just for everyone, psychological safety, if you don't know, is essentially that people feel very comfortable to be themselves, be their true selves, to ask questions, to push back, to have a crazy idea because they don't fear any sort of repercussions or consequences for that. So I'd love to ask you, how does emotion and psychological safety work together? Do you have to be able to be emotional in order to be psychologically safe, or vice versa?
It's a tough question, I guess. What we are noticing while working with it, and then majority of our team has a background in psychology, and also background in working in other positions, management positions or specialist position. And while analyzing what this how this psychological safety relates to being emotional, the tendency is that let's start inviting emotions there. I guess this is the first step, and learn how to communicate them. Being with your emotions there doesn't mean that you will burst into tears randomly or you will start screaming there out of joy. It's but if this is the first time that you are introducing emotions into your workplace, or even in any conversation, not necessarily workplace, then you might expect that person can be a lot more emotionally visible there. But once we practice that and learn from one another, we can really introduce emotions as a natural ingredient in our reflection. That currently I feel irritated or I feel pressured, with this suggestion of yours, or this competitive feeling that I have here, and remind at the same time that, hey, we are on the same team. Let's work this through, and invite others to welcome your emotions there. So it's a question how we deal with them. And this is where with Myngletik we are going towards introducing more of this emotion regulation, or educate about how emotions appear, what does it mean to us, and learn how to introduce them into our behavior that would have enough space, but also wouldn't, like, I don't know, become the center of what's happening here and now, so that we could be more productive and more stronger together there while working towards the same goals with the team.
That's a great point, that when we use the word emotion, people perhaps, or CEOs, going back to trying to sell them on these social stuff, if you say emotions, then maybe that's what they imagine. Like, oh, so everyone's going to be allowed to have some sort of crying breakdown in the middle of a staff meeting. And that's not what we're talking about when we're talking about emotions, to be clear. I mean, maybe at some point someone would have that, but really we're just talking about being comfortable to say, I feel pressure from the team on this, and I need to take a step back, or what have you. And then I would imagine everything you're doing helps people in their home lives too. I know, and certainly culture plays a role too, but that some people grow up where they're just not allowed to show their emotions. Or I know a lot of parents accidentally, I know it's not the intent, but to, if a kid's showing too much emotion, parents tend to, pipe down, and they kind of snap at the kid because it's easier for the parent, but rather than taking that time to really talk the child through, what are you feeling? How do we put words to it? What do you need? And so I think a lot of us adults maybe end up out there in the working world without having all of that emotional intelligence that we need, because we've been told emotions are not good our whole lives. So I would imagine what you're doing has a big ripple effect when you work with companies.
We certainly hope so. We are constantly checking how can we provide better tools to increase this emotional vocabulary, which usually is the very beginning that we need. And just after studying psychology, I discovered that my fear or the anger that I currently feel or identify might actually hold so many emotions behind it. It's the fear of losing something or getting some punishment there. And once you start going deeper into that, this is where by understanding self better, you can understand others better, and therefore work better together towards the goals. And you are stronger together with others. Nobody is strong alone. This is a collective way of living that leads us to higher better experiences there. And I don't see any other way. And coming from a northeast part of Europe, especially due to historical reasons, emotional intelligence wasn't a skill that was also fostered in previous generations. But we are also changing together with the Western world, who is more open already in regards to working with professional support, for example. Therapy is no longer that stigmatized, right? It's a common. It's like having a consultant of your personal life. So Eastern Europe is still growing towards it. and learning from the West. And I think there is always a way to be stronger in that sense. So no matter how comfortable we currently feel with our emotions or our colleagues' emotions, we can always be stronger there and more mindletic. This is where the name comes from.
Yes,
Connecting
like
mind
athletics,
and
but mind.
Exactly.
I don't know
You
why
can
that's hard.
always train it.
Yeah, I was struggling. Mindletic. I don't know why it's a struggle for me to say it. So
After
Terry
five
has.
times, you
I'll
can
get
see
it. Okay.
yourself.
Terry makes a comment, and Terry, you actually were reading my mind because I was thinking of mentioning this. So Terry says it seems the only emotion that was traditionally allowed was anger or frustration by the boss. And Terry, I agree with you. I have noticed, I'm an expert in the topic of workplace bullying. Well, what's a big bullying behavior? Yelling, aggressive, kind of finger pointing or body language, aggressive facial expressions. This is showing emotion. However, it's a more maybe masculine emotion because it is aggressive. Whereas crying, which is a more, or kind of connected with the feminine emotion, is seen as weak. And so we see, and I go into organizations where it's this, emotions aren't allowed. And even the person engaging in bullying, they don't like emotions. Often emotions make them uncomfortable. And so through coaching, I can help them see you're discounting people because they get emotional, but I would argue that you are also emotional. This thing that you hate, that emotions are allowed at work, and you are showing them very clearly to the point where it's hurting people. So I am sort of frustrated by that. It really speaks to the inequities at work too, that masculine emotions are allowed and feminine emotions are not. And to be emotional is seen as a kind of a weak feminine thing. And that's part of what the paradigm shift needs to be, that, we've been allowing yelling, other types of more aggressive emotions. And that's so odd. I mean, if you think about it, why is yelling okay and crying is not?
I have to say that in my bubble, which is mainly tech companies, yelling is no longer allowed. Or with yelling, you cannot expect any results there besides people leaving. It's out of question. But then it leads you towards other types of aggression. It's not only yelling, there is this passive aggressive that you can say so many things in between lines. And this is sensed by people, not necessarily directly, but they sense this feeling of being bullied there. And it also leads to people leaving jobs, especially when nowadays they have options in tech sector, especially, right? And this crying thing, it is seen as more feminine, I guess, in older type of organizations. But the younger generations, especially with this the whole LGBT movement, where we no longer have female and male as categories, we have 50 shades of femininity and masculinity, and this is amazing because we are experiencing and sharing those emotions differently. And I am being a female that likes dresses. I am in CEO's position, and I am sometimes really aggressive, especially when it comes to fighting for my team. Right. I will be aggressive there, but it doesn't mean that I will necessarily scream, because actually by screaming, I might reach a lot less than by understanding that, oh, I have this anger inside of me rising. I feel defensive. What do I fear? It's a fear behind it. What do I fear? That I will not manage this. Okay, but I have ABC plan, and this is where my aggression tunes down, and this is where I can come back to you with normal tone, or even mentioning that I feel irritated by this and threatened by this. And by acknowledging this emotion, I gain power back instead of, I don't know, not understanding it and spreading it. And this is where I even lose power. Actually, usually when you are screaming, you already lost.
Yes. And that's exactly what my coaching is focused on. We go through the model, the fight or flight model, and I just keep it simple. Like, this feedback that you're getting about how you behave is showing me that you're fighting. And that means you're operating it out of instinct and emotion and fear and anxiety. And so how do you figure out what's bothering you and address it differently. And also you're creating fighting and fleeing in the people you interact with. So that's the coaching, really, because they're not all about emotions and in fact really step away from emotions. I don't attempt to teach them all the things you're doing, emotional intelligence. It's more about communication skills and just like recognizing that how you communicate influences how they communicate. So it's a little bit different, but certainly if I can get them interested in emotional intelligence, I do. I have one other question for you, and I get this a lot too. Whose responsibility is it to make sure people feel psychologically safe? Is it employer's responsibility to do that? Is it the manager? Is it us as individuals? So I'm curious about your thoughts on that. I mean, I feel like some employers could say, well, we're all humans and adults. People can manage these things on their own. So I'm curious.
I actually asked who's responsible for emotional balance at the workplace. I asked it in social media, and also I asked it in a few of the opening events when starting to work with first corporations. So I used to do it myself, the opening events, meeting the whole organization and anonymously asking them, so who's responsible for that? And guess what? Employers were putting the responsibility on employees. Employees were putting the responsibility on employers. Yeah. Sometimes employers would put this responsibility on HR. For HR, there's one HR responsible for everyone's happiness, and sometimes even called Chief Happiness Officer, which is so unfair. Nobody can be responsible for your feelings. It's always us, ourselves, that are responsible for our feelings. Yeah. But we are influencing one another, and therefore we are always inviting both sides to work on it, and leaders lead how we work on it. As for example, introduce constructive feedback sessions, introduce anonymous surveys there if you really want to hear the truth there, learn specific questions or how to create the environment to really welcome those questions. And this is definitely on both sides, but leaders have this lead beginning at their job title, which is still on their end to invite for that. So this is where I also I love working with my colleagues currently, and I have a note for each meeting and for each one-on-one to ask how can we improve this, and especially nowadays when you cannot build anything alone, and in order to work with others you have to welcome their ideas as well, and together you can come up with things that you wouldn't by yourself. So it's useful for me as a manager, really useful, and maybe this is the beginning to understand the value behind it, to create a space where people would bring ideas there and would stop me from doing something stupid with the good arguments why we shouldn't go this or that way. Even if I come with idea that, hey guys, we really, I know we should move towards this, and I see this as a great example or a great feature that my colleagues are actually pushing me back, saying, no, Ieva, based on data we see this and that, we already went over it. And I'm like, wow, it's taken care of. And they thought it through. Sure, just do it, just go, and then I can sleep myself calmer, knowing that people are owning these things by providing this also space for them to challenge me and to push me back and to bring ideas that I haven't thought myself, and I did not even spend time on it. So I really see this paying off, and sometimes it is hard, especially if you are burning with idea there and you think that you know the best because you've done it before, but it's not always the case.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think it's chicken egg kind of a question in terms of who's responsible, but it's everyone's responsibility. It's up to an employer to create a space for people to feel comfortable and That means providing resources like training on how to do it, and for managers on how to sort of lead the charge within their team around emotions and balance and all of these social things that people need, social and emotional things. But then it's also an employee's responsibility to take ownership of their own team environment. And we do a lot of bystander intervention training, where we're training on kind of what would you do if you see something that creates a lack of psychological safety. And employees are often kind of shocked when I tell them, you're supposed to step in. It's not you're not just an observer. If you don't say anything about it, then you're participating in it because you're giving that person permission. And so you too are responsible for, addressing that, and not just waiting around for HR to step in. So Terry asked the question, how do we get buy-in for psychological safety? And I know and then she said, oops, Catherine just asked a question. But Terry, just to give you kind of maybe a clear answer, and I'm sure, Ieva, you're in the same boat. A lot of it is really showing the thousands of research articles that show people are more productive when they feel psychologically safe, when they feel comfortable to be themselves, and so on. Go ahead.
You can also find those links to Harvard, the World Health Organization, Google in our page, mindletic.com, on the front page. So this is something that we provide to managers who already believe in us, but they need to prove to somebody else. Yep. Also, by showing what companies are already investing in it and working with it, so they definitely see the value behind it by their own participation. In our case, with psychological safety and emotional intelligence, we've been working. One of the first, our client, I think around 2 years already, which is Swedbank. It's a Scandinavian bank. So plenty of tech companies. So usually this is something that is already proving the worth behind it, that it's not just blah blah there, that sometimes social science might be seen like. And we have our own data for those that we work with for a longer time. We give more precise analysis of how it changed throughout the whole time that we've been together. Our data scientist is providing specific analysis, and some companies, if they are open to share their turnover, sick leave, and other HR data, we also analyze people data together with our data scientists from statistical point of view, and then see patterns there and correlations by investing time in mental health and such activities that we are performing together within the team.
Yeah, and we also have tons of case studies on our website showing the changes in people. And we're in the same space, but we talk about it a little bit differently. But yeah, there's just so much data on this, and I think that's the answer. And then we've got a few comments from Jamie, and then we'll call it a day or a night or a morning, depending on where you are. Jamie had mentioned that tech companies do seem to be more forward as they have more diverse employees, and they need to understand and adapt to different cultures. And, obviously too, if you're a tech company, you're more inclined to adapt tech into your workplace processes and things. And then Jamie's got one other insightful comment. Understanding interdependence in an individualistic lifestyle can be difficult to manage intrinsically, while understanding how we are all connected to each other, not only by work, but emotionally, is vital for productivity. Very true, very true. And, in the end, it doesn't matter how individualistic a culture or a company culture might be. The fact is, we require other people to function. We are social creatures, and we require feeling valued by the people around us in order to have self-esteem. And according to Maslow, you can't be the best version of yourself unless you have self-esteem. So yes, it's all connected. So Ieva, again, is at Mindletic. You can find her on LinkedIn. Obviously, you can click on her name here in LinkedIn and in this event page you're on and chat with her. If you have more questions, reach out to her. This was a super cool conversation. I really enjoyed chatting with you. And we had people from Romania and Nigeria and Lithuania and India and Yemen. So we had a great audience with lots of perspectives. So thanks all for joining. And I'll see you next week. Thank you, Ieva.
Thank you so much, Catherine. It was nice chatting with you and being in the same boat for sure.
Yeah.